Have you ever felt so stressed you wanted to quit? In this video, I share how visa pressure in the United States almost broke my confidence in English until I discovered what truly matters: love, family, and small daily practice. Through a slow, simple real-life story, you'll practice English and find new strength to keep going. Visa stress begins. The email did not look dramatic. No red warning. No loud sound. Just a quiet notification about my visa status in the United States. But my heart reacted like it had heard an alarm. In that small apartment, with the heater humming softly, I stared at the screen and felt one simple truth: my future felt temporary. Visa stress is strange. It does not shout. It lingers. It follows you into the kitchen while you make coffee. It sits next to you when you try to practice English. It turns ordinary days into silent countdowns. I came to America believing that hard work and daily English practice would slowly build a stable life. But I did not understand how much uncertainty could shake my confidence. At first, I tried to act normal. I kept studying. I listened to slow English podcasts. I repeated simple sentences out loud. I am improving. I can communicate. I am learning step by step. But every time I checked my visa case online, my stomach tightened. Processing. Pending. Waiting. These words became heavier than they should have been. Psychologists explain something important about uncertainty. When the brain cannot predict an outcome, it increases stress hormones like cortisol. Cortisol helps in short-term danger. But when stress continues for weeks or months, it affects memory and speech fluency. That explained why my English suddenly felt worse. I knew basic grammar. I understood daily vocabulary. Yet when someone asked me a simple question at the store, my mind paused too long. It was not because I forgot English. It was because my nervous system was on alert. One afternoon, I tried ordering coffee. A simple sentence: "Can I get a small latte, please?" I had said it many times before. But that day, my voice felt uncertain. I overthought the pronunciation. I worried about sounding awkward. Stress magnified everything. Even small mistakes felt like proof that I did not belong. And that is what visa pressure really does. It quietly asks, do you deserve to stay? I began questioning my priorities. Was I here only for opportunity? Only for career growth? Or was there something deeper? I had built relationships here. I had fallen in love. I had started imagining a future, marriage, family, a home filled with two cultures blending together. The visa was not just a document. It represented continuity, stability, the right to build a life without fear of sudden change. Research from health psychology shows that how we interpret stress changes its effect on the body. When we see stress as a threat, our blood vessels tighten. When we see stress as a challenge, the body responds with more balanced energy. The situation does not change. The meaning does. So I experimented with meaning. Instead of saying, "This visa stress is ruining my life," I tried saying, "This stress shows how much this life matters to me." The words felt small at first, almost artificial. But language shapes thought, and thought shapes emotion. That evening, I opened a notebook and wrote one simple sentence in clear, slow English: "I am afraid, but I am still moving forward." I read it aloud. Slowly. Not perfectly, but intentionally. Then I recorded myself speaking it. Listening back felt uncomfortable. My accent sounded strong. My rhythm was not smooth. But it was real. Something shifted. I realized I was waiting for confidence to return before practicing. That was backward. Confidence often comes after action, not before it. Neuroscience suggests that small repeated behaviors build neural pathways. Every time we speak, even imperfectly, we strengthen connections in the brain. Avoidance weakens them. Practice strengthens them. Visa stress had quietly reduced my practice time. I was thinking more than speaking, worrying more than acting. The solution was not dramatic motivation. It was small consistency. I created a rule: during uncertainty, practice becomes more important, not less. Even 5 minutes of reading out loud. Even one short story about my day. Even describing the weather outside my window in simple sentences. The climate in my region was different from my home country. Colder winters. Longer nights. Dry air that made my skin uncomfortable. At first, I complained about it. But one day I described it in English instead. The air is sharp today. The sky looks endless. Turning observation into language felt grounding. It reminded me that I was still here, living, breathing, learning. Pressure did not disappear. The visa status did not instantly change. But my priorities slowly became clearer. Staying present. Protecting my relationship. Continuing to grow. These mattered more than perfect pronunciation. Visa stress began as fear. But beneath the fear, there was attachment. There was love. There was commitment to a future I cared about deeply. Sometimes pressure does not destroy your path. It simply forces you to ask why you chose it in the first place. First winter in America. The first winter in America did not gently introduce itself. It arrived like a test I did not study for. The air felt sharper than anything I had known before. Back home, winter was cool, sometimes rainy, but still friendly. Here, the wind felt personal. It cut through my jacket, slipped into my gloves, and reminded me that I was very far from everything familiar. Cold weather does something interesting to the mind. When your body is uncomfortable, your thoughts often become less patient. I noticed that on freezing mornings, my motivation to practice English dropped. I wanted warmth, not vocabulary. I wanted comfort, not conversation. Seasonal changes affect mood more than we realize. Research shows that shorter daylight hours can lower serotonin levels, which influence mood and energy. In simple words, winter can quietly make you feel tired, unmotivated, even slightly sad. Now add visa stress on top of that. The combination felt heavy. One morning, snow covered the streets outside our apartment. It was beautiful in photos. In reality, it was slippery and inconvenient. I walked carefully to the bus stop, repeating English sentences in my head like mental exercise. The weather is freezing. The roads are icy. I need thicker gloves. These were simple sentences, but they were alive. They described my real experience. That was the moment I realized something powerful. When English connects to your current reality, it sticks better. Instead of studying random textbook topics like booking a hotel or at the airport, I began describing my actual life in America. My heater is too loud. The grocery store closes early because of snow. My hands are shaking from the cold. The vocabulary felt practical, immediate, useful. Culturally, winter also revealed differences. In my home country, neighbors often talk more, gather more, share food more frequently. In this American city, winter made everything quieter. People moved quickly from car to building. Conversations were shorter. Smiles were polite but brief. At first, I interpreted that as distance. Later, I understood it as rhythm. Every culture has its own social temperature, just like climate. Some places are emotionally warm and physically warm. Some are physically cold but privately kind. Understanding that reduced my sensitivity. It helped me stop personalizing every short interaction. One evening, I slipped slightly on the icy sidewalk. A stranger immediately reached out and said, "Are you okay?" His tone was calm, sincere. That small interaction changed something in me. The culture was not cold. It was simply different in expression. I practiced that sentence later at home. "Thank you for helping me." I repeated it slowly. Then I added variations. "I appreciate it." "That was very kind of you." Repetition builds fluency. But emotional memory builds confidence. There is also science behind practicing in real environments. Context-dependent learning suggests that we remember information better when we learn it in the same context where we use it. Speaking English while walking in snow made the vocabulary feel anchored to experience. Still, there were difficult nights. The sky turned dark at 4:30 p.m. The apartment felt small. I missed my family deeply. Visa uncertainty plus winter isolation created quiet anxiety. I questioned again, can I really build a life here? Instead of escaping into social media, I started recording short winter journals in English. 2 or 3 minutes each night. Nothing complicated. Today was very cold. I felt lonely in the afternoon. But I cooked dinner with my partner, and we laughed. These recordings were not perfect. My grammar had small mistakes. My pronunciation was inconsistent. But they were authentic. Over time, I noticed something subtle. The more I described winter instead of fighting it, the less it intimidated me. Language transformed discomfort into narrative. Narrative created meaning. Meaning reduced fear. Climate differences were not just weather changes. They symbolized adaptation. Just like my body needed thicker coats, my mind needed thicker emotional resilience. Just like sidewalks needed salt to prevent slipping, my daily routine needed small habits to prevent discouragement. Winter in America tested my physical comfort and my emotional stability. But it also strengthened my English in an unexpected way. When you describe real discomfort in simple words, you gain ownership of your experience. Pressure from visa status remained. Cold air remained. But I was slowly building something warmer inside, clarity about why I was here and commitment to keep practicing, even when the wind was against me. Because sometimes growth does not happen in perfect seasons. It happens when you decide to speak anyway, even with frozen fingers and a trembling voice. Culture shock moments. Culture shock rarely explodes. It drips. Small misunderstandings. Tiny embarrassments. Quiet confusion in ordinary places like supermarkets, banks, or family dinners. At first, I thought my biggest challenge in America would be English grammar. I was wrong. The real challenge was invisible rules. In my home country, people often ask personal questions quickly. Are you married? How much do you earn? When will you have children? It is normal. It shows care. In the United States, those questions can feel too direct. Privacy is valued differently. Independence is emphasized. Personal space is respected almost strictly. The first time I attended a small gathering with my partner's friends, I felt like I was observing a social experiment. People spoke confidently about opinions, politics, work, lifestyle, without waiting for agreement. They said, "I disagree," calmly, without anger. Back home, disagreement is often softened. Here, it was straightforward. My brain worked overtime. Not only translating English words, but translating social meaning. Cognitive scientists explain that cultural adaptation increases cognitive load. Your brain is processing language, tone, facial expression, and social expectations simultaneously. That extra load explains why I felt exhausted after short conversations. It was not just English. It was decoding a new system. One day, at a grocery store, a cashier asked, "How's your day going?" I answered honestly. I described my long morning, my visa worries, my confusion about paperwork. The line behind me grew longer. The cashier smiled politely but briefly. Later, I understood, in many American contexts, "How's your day?" is a greeting, not an invitation for a full story. That small moment taught me pragmatic English, how language functions socially, not just grammatically. Instead of feeling embarrassed, I turned it into practice. I rehearsed short responses, "Pretty good, thanks." "Doing well, how about you?" I practiced tone. Friendly. Light. Brief. Language is not only vocabulary, it is timing. Policy differences also surprised me. Systems in America can feel both efficient and rigid. Appointments must be scheduled. Forms must be precise. Deadlines matter. There is less flexibility in some bureaucratic processes. At first, I interpreted that as coldness. Over time, I began to see it as structure. Structure reduces ambiguity. Ambiguity increases anxiety. Ironically, the same system that stressed me also provided clarity. If the instructions say submit document A, B, and C, then that is exactly what you do. No hidden negotiation. No informal shortcuts. Understanding this reduced some of my visa-related fear. The system was not targeting me personally. It was following procedure. Cultural difference also appeared inside my relationship. In my culture, emotional expression can be indirect. Silence can mean care. In my partner's American style, communication was direct. Tell me what you feel. Explain what you need. At first, that felt uncomfortable. But it also improved my English dramatically. Love forced clarity. When we had small disagreements, I could not hide behind vague language. I had to say, slowly, "I feel anxious about the visa. I am afraid of losing stability." Speaking emotions in English was harder than speaking about weather. But it was also powerful. Psychologists note that labeling emotions reduces their intensity. When you say, "I feel stressed," your brain shifts activity from the emotional center to the language center. Simply naming a feeling can calm it. That explained why conversations, even difficult ones, left me lighter. Culture shock became less threatening when I reframed it as data collection. Instead of thinking, "This is wrong," I began thinking, "This is different." Curiosity reduces defensiveness. Curiosity improves learning. I started observing small details. How neighbors respected quiet hours. How children addressed teachers by first name. How couples divided chores more equally. These were not judgments. They were observations. and every observation became a sentence in my English practice journal. The culture values independence. People respect personal boundaries. Communication is direct, but not necessarily aggressive. Through storytelling, I was building fluency. Through difference, I was building flexibility. Visa stress still hovered in the background. But culture shock slowly transformed from threat to teacher. Each awkward moment became a lesson. Each misunderstanding became vocabulary. Each uncomfortable conversation strengthened both my language and my relationship. Because adaptation is not about becoming someone else. It is about expanding who you already are, one awkward sentence at a time. Losing motivation to speak. Silence can feel safer than mistakes. That realization scared me more than any visa update. There was a period when I spoke less and less English, even though I was living in the United States. I listened. I nodded. I smiled. But I avoided long conversations. Visa stress was still unresolved. Culture shock had drained my energy. Winter had not fully released its grip. And somewhere inside, a quiet thought appeared, maybe I'm not improving fast enough. Motivation does not disappear loudly. It fades quietly. I used to practice speaking every day. I recorded short stories. I read paragraphs out loud. But during that stressful period, I told myself I was too busy. In reality, I was afraid of confirming my insecurity. If I spoke and made mistakes, it would feel like proof that I did not belong here. Psychology calls this avoidance behavior. When something threatens our self-image, we avoid it to protect our ego. The short-term effect is relief. The long-term effect is stagnation. And stagnation feels like failure. I noticed something physical too. When someone asked me a question unexpectedly, my chest tightened. My brain felt slower. Words that normally came easily suddenly hid. Stress activates the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for fear. When the amygdala is active, the prefrontal cortex, which helps with language and decision-making, works less efficiently. In simple terms, fear steals fluency. That knowledge helped me stop blaming myself. One evening, my partner asked gently, "Why are you quieter these days?" I tried to explain in English. The sentences were slow. I feel embarrassed sometimes. I think my English is worse now. Saying it out loud felt vulnerable. But vulnerability builds connection. He responded simply, "Your English isn't worse. You're just more stressed." That sentence stayed with me. Stress narrows attention. It makes us focus on threats. My brain was focusing on visa uncertainty, not language growth. So of course progress felt invisible. Instead of trying to feel motivated again, I changed strategy. I reduced the size of the task. Not 30 minutes of speaking practice. Just 3 minutes. Not a long story. Just describing one object in the room. The table is wooden. It has small scratches. We bought it last month. It sounded basic. But consistency matters more than intensity. Behavioral science shows that tiny habits repeated daily create more sustainable change than dramatic efforts done rarely. The brain likes achievable goals. Success, even small, releases dopamine. Dopamine reinforces behavior. After a few days of small practice, something shifted. The fear did not disappear completely, but it softened. I realized I had been measuring progress emotionally instead of practically. I expected confidence to feel strong every day. That expectation was unrealistic. Progress in language learning is not linear. It rises. It plateaus. It dips during stress. Then it rises again. I also changed how I listened. Instead of choosing fast, complex English videos, I selected slow storytelling content. Real-life topics. Marriage. Daily routines. Cultural differences. Listening became less about testing myself and more about relating. Then I added a simple speaking exercise connected to my life. I explained my visa situation out loud as if I were telling a friend. Not dramatically. Not perfectly. Just clearly. I am waiting for approval. The process takes time. It makes me anxious, but I am learning patience. Describing my own stress in English reduced its power. It turned chaos into narrative. And here is something important. Motivation often follows action, not the other way around. We think we need to feel ready first. But action creates readiness. One afternoon, I called a customer service number to ask about a small billing issue. Normally, I would have avoided it. That day, I forced myself gently. The conversation was simple. I repeated information. I asked one clarification question. When the call ended, I felt surprisingly proud. Not because my English was perfect, but because I did not hide. Visa stress had tried to shrink my voice. Culture shock had made me cautious. Winter had made me tired. But speaking, even imperfectly, expanded me again. Losing motivation was not the end of my journey. It was a signal. A sign that my strategy needed adjustment, not abandonment. Silence feels safe in the moment. But growth lives in sound, even if that sound shakes a little. Learning through stories. Textbooks never asked me how I felt about waiting for a visa. Grammar exercises did not care if I missed my family. Vocabulary lists did not understand winter loneliness. That was the problem. I was studying English like a subject, not living it like a language. Everything began to change when I stopped separating my life from my learning. One evening, instead of opening a test prep book, I opened a blank document and typed a simple title, My Visa Story. I did not try to sound advanced. I did not search for impressive vocabulary. I wrote in the most basic English I could manage. I came to the United States with hope. I am waiting for my visa result. I feel scared sometimes. The sentences were simple, but they were true. There is strong research supporting story-based learning. Neuroscientists explain that when information is placed inside a narrative, the brain activates multiple areas at once: language centers, emotional centers, and memory systems. Stories are easier to remember because they create connections. Random vocabulary floats. Stories anchor. When I reread my short paragraph out loud, something powerful happened. I was not just practicing pronunciation. I was reclaiming my experience. I was turning stress into structure. So I created a new habit. Every week, I would write one small story about my real life in America. Not fiction. Not fantasy. Reality. One week, I wrote about my first snowstorm. Another week, I described a cultural misunderstanding at a dinner table. Then I wrote about my partner and me cooking together in a small kitchen, mixing spices from my culture with ingredients from his. Language became alive. I also noticed that storytelling reduced performance pressure. When you memorize textbook dialogues, you worry about correctness. When you tell your own story, you focus on meaning. Communication becomes the goal, not perfection. In one story, I wrote about the day I almost cried in a parking lot after checking my visa status again. I described the sky, the cold air, the silence in my car. Then I wrote how I took a deep breath and said out loud, I will not quit. Reading that story later felt empowering. I was listening to my own resilience. From a psychological perspective, this practice is close to narrative therapy. When people organize their experiences into stories, they gain a sense of control. Chaos becomes sequence. Fear becomes chapter, not identity. I also began recording myself reading these stories slowly. At first, I noticed every mistake. My accent. My pauses. My occasional grammar errors. But after a few recordings, I noticed improvement. My rhythm became smoother. My breathing became calmer. Confidence was building quietly. Then I added a new step. After reading my story, I would retell it without looking at the text. Not perfectly. Just from memory. This improved speaking fluency dramatically. Retelling forces the brain to retrieve language actively, not passively recognize it. There is a concept in learning science called retrieval practice. When you actively recall information, the memory becomes stronger. That is why retelling your own story is more powerful than rereading it 10 times. My partner started listening to some of these recordings. He smiled and said, your English sounds more natural when you talk about your real life." That feedback mattered more than any test score. Story-based learning also connected deeply to my relationship. When I explained my cultural background in simple English, I felt understood. When I described my childhood climate, my family traditions, my expectations about marriage, I was not just practicing language, I was building intimacy. Visa stress still existed. Paperwork still needed attention. But storytelling shifted my identity from someone waiting to someone growing. Instead of asking, "Will my visa be approved?" I began asking, "What is this experience teaching me?" The answers were not dramatic. Patience, communication, emotional honesty. Through stories, English stopped feeling like an obstacle and started feeling like a bridge between cultures, between two people, between fear and hope. I learned something essential. Language grows fastest when it carries something real. Not because grammar becomes easier, but because meaning becomes stronger. Love in a foreign land. Love does not ask for perfect grammar. It asks for honesty. I met my partner during a time when my English was functional but fragile. I could explain ideas. I could share opinions. But deep emotions? Those felt risky. Expressing love in a second language is like walking on thin ice. You are careful. You test each word before stepping forward. In the beginning, our conversations were simple. We talked about food, weather, work schedules. What did you eat today? How was your meeting? These small exchanges built rhythm. Rhythm builds comfort. But as our relationship grew, the conversations became deeper. We talked about family expectations, about marriage, about the possibility of raising children between two cultures. Suddenly, vocabulary mattered more. Not fancy vocabulary. Precise vocabulary. Saying "I am worried" is different from saying "I am terrified." Saying "I need support" is different from saying "I feel lonely." Emotional accuracy improves connection. Psychologists explain that couples who communicate clearly about feelings tend to have stronger relationships. Clarity reduces misunderstanding. In intercultural relationships, clarity becomes even more important. Cultural assumptions differ. Emotional expression styles differ. Directness levels differ. At first, I struggled with direct emotional language. In my culture, sometimes love is shown through action more than words. Cooking, helping, staying quiet during conflict. In his American style, verbal affirmation was normal. Tell me what you feel. Explain what you need. That pushed my English in a new direction. One evening, during a difficult conversation about my visa uncertainty, I said slowly, "I am scared that everything could change." My voice was soft. My grammar was simple. But the message was clear. He responded, "We will face it together." That sentence changed my understanding of both love and language. Under pressure, relationships can break or strengthen. Visa stress affected both of us. It influenced future planning, financial decisions, even where we imagined living long-term. But instead of avoiding hard topics, we practiced speaking through them. Research on stress and relationships shows something interesting. Shared stress can increase bonding if partners communicate openly. The stress becomes our problem, not my burden. Language is the tool that transforms isolation into partnership. I also noticed that love increased my motivation to improve English. Not because I wanted to impress him, but because I wanted to understand his world more fully. His humor, his childhood stories, his cultural references. Language became access. We laughed about my early pronunciation mistakes. Once, I confused sheet and another similar-sounding word at a furniture store. We both froze for a second. Then we laughed until tears formed. Humor reduces shame. Shame blocks learning. Laughter opens it. Gradually, I became less afraid of speaking imperfectly. In love, imperfection is visible anyway. You cannot hide your real self for long. So why hide your accent? There is neuroscience behind this too. When we feel emotionally safe, the brain's threat response decreases. Lower threat response means better cognitive performance. That includes language fluency. Safety improves speech. I began noticing that my English flowed more smoothly during relaxed conversations at home than in formal settings. Emotional security was acting like invisible support. Love also redefined success for me. Before, I measured achievement by external approval, visa status, career progress, fluent speech. Now, I began measuring it by connection. Are we communicating honestly? Are we building trust? Are we growing together? One night, after a long discussion about our future, I said in clear, steady English, "No matter what happens with the visa, I am grateful I met you." That sentence felt powerful. Not because it was complex, but because it was certain. In that moment, I realized something profound. Pressure was revealing my priorities. The visa mattered. Stability mattered. But love mattered more. English was no longer just a skill for survival. It was the language of my commitment. The language of shared plans. The language of hope. In a foreign land, I found something familiar, human connection. And through that connection, my voice grew stronger. Because when you speak from the heart, fluency follows courage. Marriage under pressure. Marriage does not remove stress. It magnifies whatever is already there. When we decided to get married, it was not a dramatic movie moment. It was quiet, practical, loving, and very real. We were choosing each other while my visa status was still uncertain. That choice felt brave and slightly terrifying at the same time. Marriage in the United States also comes with paperwork, legal processes, and financial planning. Forms, appointments, signatures, deadlines. Under normal conditions, these are manageable. Under visa pressure, they feel heavier. I remember sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by documents. Tax records, identification copies, proof of address, evidence of relationship. It felt strange to gather proof of love. Photos, messages, travel history. Our private memories organized into official evidence. At first, I felt offended by the process. Why should love be documented? But then I reframed it. Systems require structure. Structure is not doubt. It is procedure. That mental shift reduced emotional resistance. Still, stress affected our communication. Small disagreements felt larger. A short reply sounded colder than it was. This is common under pressure. Research shows that chronic stress reduces emotional patience. The brain becomes more reactive. Tone feels sharper. Neutral comments feel negative. One evening, we argued about something minor, who forgot to send a document. The argument was not about the document. It was about fear. Fear of delays. Fear of rejection. Fear of losing the future we were building. After a few tense minutes, I paused and said slowly, I think I am reacting because I am scared. That sentence changed the direction of the conversation. Naming fear softened it. Marriage under pressure taught me that emotional vocabulary is more important than advanced grammar. Saying I feel overwhelmed is more powerful than using complicated structures. Clear language builds safety. Safety strengthens partnership. Culturally, I also noticed differences in expectations about marriage roles. In my upbringing, certain responsibilities often belonged to one partner more than the other. Here, equality was emphasized strongly. Shared chores. Shared financial planning. Shared decision-making. At first, I carried unconscious assumptions. Then I realized adaptation is not about losing identity. It is about negotiation. Through English conversations, we negotiated roles that respected both cultures. Language became our negotiation table. I practiced phrases like, "Can we divide this differently? I need help with this task. What do you think is fair?" These were not phrases I learned in textbooks. They were survival tools for partnership. There is a concept in relationship psychology called we-ness. Couples who use more we language, "We will solve this," "We are planning," "We are waiting," tend to feel stronger unity. I noticed that when we shifted from my visa problem to our situation, tension decreased. Pressure did not disappear. Processing times remained uncertain. But unity reduced isolation. Financial stress also entered the picture. Immigration processes cost money. Wedding expenses require budgeting. Budget conversations require clarity. I had to discuss numbers confidently in English. At first, that intimidated me. Money vocabulary feels serious. So I practiced. Our monthly expenses are, we need to save for, this fee is required. Speaking clearly about finances increased my confidence. Practical language builds real-world strength. One night, after mailing an important packet of documents, we sat quietly on the couch. No dramatic celebration. Just relief. I looked at him and said, no matter the result, I am proud of us. That sentence carried weight. Marriage under pressure revealed something unexpected. Stress can expose cracks, but it can also reveal commitment. It shows whether you run separately or stand together. My English improved not because life became easier, but because life became more real. Real conversations. Real decisions. Real responsibility. I learned that fluency is not only about pronunciation. It is about participation. Showing up in difficult conversations. Speaking even when your voice shakes slightly. Visa stress began as an individual burden. Marriage transformed it into shared resilience. And sometimes, what truly matters under pressure is not the approval letter, but the person sitting next to you while you wait. Small English, big connection. Fluency did not arrive in a dramatic moment. It grew quietly, inside ordinary conversations. One afternoon, our neighbor knocked on the door to return a package delivered by mistake. It was a simple situation. A box. A smile. A short exchange. But I felt the familiar nervousness rise in my chest. Not because the conversation was complex. Because it was spontaneous. Spontaneous English used to scare me more than formal conversations. There is no preparation. No script. Just response. He handed me the box and said, I think this is yours. I replied, yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. My pronunciation was steady. My tone was warm. The conversation lasted maybe 30 seconds. But when I closed the door, I felt unexpectedly proud. Why? Because connection does not require advanced vocabulary. It requires presence. In the past, I believed that improving English meant sounding like a native speaker. Losing my accent. Speaking quickly. Using idioms naturally. But living in America taught me something different. Communication is successful when meaning is clear and emotion is respectful. Accent is not weakness. It is history. Research in sociolinguistics shows that listeners care more about clarity and confidence than accent perfection. When speakers slow down slightly and organize their thoughts clearly, comprehension improves, even if pronunciation is not flawless. So I shifted focus. Instead of trying to eliminate my accent, I worked on pacing. I practiced speaking slightly slower, pausing intentionally, finishing sentences fully. At the grocery store, instead of rushing, I said clearly, "Could you please tell me where the rice is?" If I did not understand the answer, I asked, "Sorry, could you repeat that more slowly?" Each small interaction strengthened my confidence. There is a psychological concept called exposure therapy. When we face small fears gradually, anxiety decreases over time. I unintentionally applied this to English. Short conversations, low-stakes environments, repetition. Over months, I noticed something subtle. My body reacted less intensely. My heart did not race as quickly. My shoulders stayed relaxed. The language had not changed dramatically. My nervous system had. At home, family video calls also became practice opportunities. Explaining American life to my parents in English first, then translating if needed, helped reinforce vocabulary. I described climate differences, cultural habits, even policy procedures in simple terms. The winter here is very cold. People value personal space. The immigration process requires many documents. Speaking these sentences repeatedly strengthened both clarity and confidence. I also began volunteering at a small community event. Nothing complex. Just helping organize chairs and greeting visitors. Saying, "Welcome. The meeting starts at 6. Please sign here." These phrases were basic, but they placed me in active participation. Participation transforms identity. Instead of feeling like a temporary visitor waiting for visa approval, I felt like a contributing member of the community. Psychologists emphasize that belonging improves mental health. Belonging reduces stress. Reduced stress improves cognitive function, including language fluency. It is all connected. One day, a colleague at a part-time job told me, "You explain things very clearly." That sentence surprised me. Clear? I had spent years worrying about sounding perfect. But clarity was what people noticed. Small English. Big connection. I began teaching myself a simple rule: focus on being understood, not being impressive. Impressive fades. Understanding remains. Even in my marriage, small phrases built stability. Thank you for your support. I appreciate your patience. I am proud of us. These sentences are not complicated, but they create emotional safety. Under pressure, we often think big solutions are required. Big decisions. big changes. But most transformation happens in small repetitions. Small conversations. Small courage. Visa stress was still present. The outcome was still uncertain. But my daily life no longer revolved around fear. It revolved around interaction. And interaction built belonging. Because sometimes the most powerful sentence is not advanced. It is simply spoken with sincerity. Policy, paperwork, and patience. Paperwork has a special talent for making your heart beat faster. Even when nothing is technically wrong, a thick envelope from an immigration office can feel like a final exam. I remember holding one letter in my hands, staring at the official logo, imagining every possible outcome before even opening it. Policies are impersonal. They are written in formal language. Applicant must provide. Failure to submit may result in. The tone is neutral. But when you are the applicant, it feels personal. At first, I reacted emotionally to every sentence. If I did not immediately understand a paragraph, I panicked. What if I misunderstand something important? What if my English is not strong enough to interpret this correctly? That fear is common. Under stress, our brains overestimate risk. Psychologists call this catastrophizing, imagining the worst-case scenario automatically. The mind tries to protect you by preparing for disaster. But most of the time, the disaster exists only in imagination. So I changed my method. Instead of reading documents quickly and emotionally, I read them slowly and analytically. One sentence at a time. I underlined key words. I looked up unfamiliar terms calmly. Supplementary evidence. Processing time frame. Eligibility criteria. Breaking complex language into manageable pieces reduced fear. There is strong evidence that structured problem-solving reduces anxiety. When you move from vague worry to specific action steps, your brain shifts from emotional reaction to logical processing. That shift alone lowers stress. I also created a simple checklist for every requirement. Not in complicated language. Just clear instructions. Print bank statement. Attach marriage certificate copy. Sign page 4. Each completed task gave me a small sense of progress. Progress, even tiny, builds psychological momentum. Patience, however, was the hardest part. Once documents are submitted, control decreases. You wait. Weeks. Sometimes months. During that waiting period, the imagination becomes loud again. What if they reject it? What if there is a delay? What if we have to start over? This is where mindset mattered most. I reminded myself of something simple. Policies are systems, not judgments. A delay is not a personal failure. A request for more information is not a rejection of my identity. Separating process from self-worth protected my confidence. I also practiced explaining the process out loud in English, as if teaching someone else. First, we submit the application. Then we receive a confirmation notice. After that, we wait for review. Teaching reinforces understanding. Understanding reduces fear. There is a concept in cognitive behavioral therapy called cognitive restructuring. It means identifying distorted thoughts and replacing them with balanced ones. Instead of "this delay means everything is wrong," I practiced saying, "Delays are common." We followed instructions carefully. Balanced thinking does not deny risk. It reduces exaggeration. My partner and I also set boundaries around how often we would check status updates. Checking 10 times a day increased anxiety. Checking once every few days felt healthier. Limiting exposure to uncertainty prevented obsession. Meanwhile, life continued. Work. Household chores. Conversations. Small joys. I realized something important. Waiting does not mean life pauses. The system may be processing documents, but I am still living. One afternoon, after mailing another requested form, I felt unexpectedly calm. Not because I knew the outcome, but because I knew we had done everything correctly. Preparation replaced panic. Patience became an active practice, not passive suffering. In slow English, I told myself, I cannot control the decision. I can control my effort. That sentence grounded me. Visa stress had once felt like a storm controlling my mood. Now it felt more like weather I was learning to live with. Sometimes cloudy. Sometimes uncertain. But not permanent. Policies test organization. Paperwork tests attention. Waiting tests emotional strength. And under pressure, I was discovering that patience is not weakness. It is disciplined trust, in process, in partnership, in personal growth. Because sometimes the most powerful progress happens while nothing seems to be happening at all. The quiet strength you don't notice. There was no dramatic moment when everything suddenly became easy. No big celebration. No instant approval. No magical email that erased all stress forever. Instead, something quieter happened. One morning, I woke up and realized I was not afraid anymore. The situation had not changed. The paperwork was still processing. The future was still uncertain. But my reaction was different. My heart was calmer. My thoughts were slower. My breathing was steady. That is when I understood something important. Strength does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it grows silently, in the background, while you are busy surviving. For months, I thought I was barely holding on. I thought I was weak because I cried, because I worried, because I felt tired. But looking back, I see something else. I kept going. Even on days when my confidence was low, I still practiced English. Even when my mind was full of fear, I still showed up to conversations. Even when the future felt unstable, I still planned small goals. That is resilience. Resilience is not the absence of stress. It is movement despite stress. Research in psychology shows that people often underestimate their own coping ability. During difficult periods, we focus on discomfort. We rarely notice adaptation. But the brain and body are constantly adjusting, learning, stabilizing. I began to see evidence of growth in small ways. I understood official letters faster. I spoke English with less hesitation. I reacted to uncertainty with less panic. These were not dramatic changes. They were subtle shifts. But subtle shifts change direction over time. There is a powerful concept called post-traumatic growth. It suggests that after stressful experiences, people sometimes develop stronger self-awareness, deeper relationships, and clearer priorities. I did not experience trauma in an extreme sense. But I did experience prolonged uncertainty. And in that uncertainty, my values became clearer. I cared less about perfect grammar. I cared more about meaningful communication. I cared less about external validation. I cared more about internal stability. I cared less about speed. I cared more about consistency. One evening, my partner said, "You seem stronger lately." At first, I disagreed. I did not feel strong. I still had doubts. I still had moments of frustration. But strength is not the absence of doubt. It is the ability to move with doubt. I realized something else too. I had been measuring myself by unrealistic standards. I expected to be fearless, fluent, perfectly confident. That expectation created unnecessary pressure. When I changed the standard, from perfection to progress, everything softened. Progress is measurable. Perfection is endless. If you are watching this while feeling tired, discouraged, or close to giving up, I want you to consider something gently. Maybe you are stronger than you think. Maybe the fact that you are still trying, still searching, still listening to this story means something important. Growth is rarely dramatic. It is often repetitive, quiet, boring, consistent. And consistency builds identity. I stopped asking, "When will this be over?" I started asking, "Who am I becoming through this?" That question changed everything. Because the visa process will end one day. Policies will change. Situations will shift. But the emotional skills you build, patience, clarity, resilience, stay with you. Stress introduced me to parts of myself I did not know before. And I am grateful for that. Not because it was easy, but because it revealed strength I did not know I had. When the email finally came. The email arrived on an ordinary afternoon. No dramatic music. No warning. just a notification sound. For a few seconds, I stared at the screen without opening it. My heart was beating fast again, not from fear this time, but from the weight of everything that had led to this moment. I took a slow breath. Then I opened it. The message was simple, direct, professional. The case had been approved. I expected to feel explosive joy. I expected to jump, cry loudly, call everyone immediately. Instead, I felt something softer. Relief. A deep, quiet relief that moved through my body like warm water. All the months of waiting, the anxiety, the overthinking, the practicing, the doubting, they did not disappear. They settled. They became part of my story. And in that moment, I realized something surprising. The approval was not the biggest victory. The biggest victory was who I had become before the approval arrived. If the answer had been different, I would have been disappointed. Of course. But I also knew I would not collapse the way I once feared. I had built emotional muscles during the waiting. That changed everything. We celebrated that night in a very simple way. No luxury dinner. No big party. Just a quiet meal together and a long conversation about the journey. We laughed about the panic over small details. We remembered the nights of doubt. We acknowledged how much stronger our relationship had become. Pressure had tested us, but it had also aligned us. Later that evening, I practiced reading the approval email out loud in English. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to hear how far I had come. My pronunciation was clearer. My voice was steadier. My breathing was calm. That was growth you cannot see on paper. Sometimes we think the goal will save us. If I just pass this test. If I just get this visa. If I just fix this problem. But goals are milestones. They are not identity. The real transformation happens in the ordinary days, the ones when you feel tired but continue anyway. Looking back, I understand something important. The hardest part was never the policy. It was my own fear. And once I learned to sit with fear instead of running from it, everything became lighter. If you are still in your waiting season, whatever that looks like for you, please hear this clearly. Waiting is not wasted time. It is training. Training for patience. Training for emotional regulation. Training for self-trust. One day, your email will arrive, maybe not literally, but in some form. And when it does, you will see that the strongest version of you was being built long before the result appeared. That is the part no one talks about. Success feels good. But becoming resilient feels powerful. And resilience stays. Thank you for listening to this journey. If this story helped you breathe a little slower, think a little clearer, or feel a little less alone, then the struggle was worth sharing. Keep going. Even when it feels quiet. even when it feels slow, even when no one sees your effort. Because growth is happening. And one day, you will look back and realize you didn't give up. You evolved. After the storm. Life did not suddenly become perfect after that email. There were still responsibilities. Still adjustments. Still moments of cultural confusion. Still days when English felt heavy on my tongue. But something fundamental had shifted. I no longer saw challenges as threats. I saw them as training. That mindset changed how I approached everything: work conversations, new social situations, even small misunderstandings at the grocery store. Instead of thinking, "What if I fail?" I began thinking, "What can I learn here?" Curiosity replaced fear. And curiosity is powerful. Neuroscience shows that when we become curious, the brain moves away from threat mode and into learning mode. Stress hormones decrease. Openness increases. The same situation feels different, not because the outside changed, but because the internal lens changed. I started speaking more, even when my sentences were not perfect. I started asking questions without apologizing for my accent. I started allowing pauses without feeling embarrassed. Perfection had once been my silent enemy. I thought I needed to sound flawless to be respected. But I learned something surprising. Clarity matters more than perfection. Confidence matters more than accent. And confidence grows from action. There is a quiet freedom in accepting imperfection. When you stop fighting yourself, you gain energy. When you stop trying to control every outcome, you gain peace. Looking back at the most difficult months, I no longer feel anger or shame. I feel gratitude. Gratitude for the version of me who cried but continued. Gratitude for the partner who stood steady beside me. Gratitude for the pressure that forced growth. Hard seasons are uncomfortable teachers. But they are honest. If you are in your own storm right now, maybe not about a visa, maybe about something completely different, pause for a moment. Notice that you are still here. Still breathing. Still trying. Still searching for answers. That matters. You do not need dramatic motivation. You do not need instant clarity. You do not need to feel brave every day. You just need to keep taking small, consistent steps. One form. One conversation. One practice session. One honest breath. And slowly, almost invisibly, your identity changes. You stop being someone who almost quits. You become someone who endures. That is not loud. But it is powerful. This story was never just about immigration paperwork. It was about resilience. It was about rediscovering self-trust. It was about realizing that the moment you feel like giving up might actually be the moment you are closest to growth. If this journey reflects even a small part of your own experience, Hold on to that connection. You are not behind. You are not weak. You are in the middle of becoming stronger. And that process, though uncomfortable, is shaping a version of you that future challenges will not easily shake. Take a slow breath with me. Inhale. Exhale. You are still moving forward. And that is enough. Before you leave this video, pause for a second. What if the moment you feel like quitting is actually the moment your breakthrough is forming? This journey was never just about visa stress, life in the United States, or learning English as a second language. It was about resilience, mental strength, emotional growth, and finding confidence when everything feels uncertain. And if you're still watching, it means something inside you is not ready to give up. That matters. On this channel, we don't just talk about English listening practice or slow English stories. We talk about real life, motivation during hard times, self-improvement, overcoming anxiety, building confidence abroad, and growing stronger under pressure. If this story connected with you, imagine what the next one will unlock. The next video goes even deeper, into the hidden mindset shift that separates people who survive from people who transform. And trust me, it's not what most people think. So don't disappear now. Subscribe to the channel for more slow English stories, real-life motivation, personal growth journeys, and practical mindset lessons for anyone feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or close to quitting. Like this video if it spoke to you. Comment below, I'm still going. And share this with someone who needs strength today. Because this isn't just a channel. It's a reminder that you are stronger than your hardest season. And we're only getting started.